Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about boring apps. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, why is it that computer programmers seem to make the most work on the most boring apps despite their problem-solving skills? Well, I suppose that it has mostly to do with that a person is paying them to work on the boring thing that they are working on, and most companies actually make most of their money from fairly simple systems, to be honest. And it's actually a little bit of a unusual thing to work on something that is more advanced than your standard CRUD system. It's almost everyone's reality, actually. It's only when you get to there are certain projects that are more advanced in terms of what functionality and what you need to do. And it's actually funny because I always find that the most like the really passionate software developers, they're usually a little bit on the hunt for those projects because it's sort of like if you think about the biggest areas in industry and the different company types that are out there, a lot of the companies in the world are doing similar sorts of things. It's probably not going to be the most innovative, interesting place in the world to work in logistics or travel or things like that. But these are very large areas which employs millions and millions of people and has like enormous amounts of revenue and so forth and so forth. So for us software developers, it's sort of the same thing. And if you are a car mechanic, as an example, most likely you are working in like sort of the same way. It might not be the most exciting, innovative place in the world to work, but then there are car mechanics who work on very advanced luxury cars, or maybe you work in Formula One or like these, race types of things. Just as actors or anybody or musicians, most are working in a fairly rosy, romantic way, and some people work in, Hollywood or wherever, right? And software developers have the same sort of thing. And that's really down to doesn't have so much to do with your problem solving skills. It has more to do with one part, availability. What jobs do you have in your region, and how much risk are you willing to take on, and what is your personal motivation? Because I've worked with software developers who are really, really, really good, and they work in startups, even though they could probably swing getting more money in some other company because it makes them happy, or they work in some big corporate job or with the government or something like that, when they're really, really good, and they can probably do better if they really were hungry and on the hunt, but they have other priorities in life. They care about different stuff. And then you have people like myself, for example, who has like an interest on working on what I call interesting problems, because to me it's not really important to have an interesting, well, it's not important to have an interesting app to work on, because I don't really mind so much what I'm working on as long as the problem is interesting. And so when I pick a project, it's really down to what type of problem are we solving. And that's because, as you were mentioning, my problem solving skills are like, well, I'm not going to talk about how good they are, but I'm saying that I have a need to test them against issues that are very difficult to deal with. And to me, working on, an internal, these days I work on an internal system for a very big company, and the problem that I'm facing is enormous. It is literally the same sort of problem that a company such as Amazon had to solve for creating their digital platform. And that doesn't sound very exciting because the app is boring as you can possibly imagine, but its value to the company and the people who are working with that company is enormous. If we manage to do this, or like if I and like people I work with manage to solve this, it will be a historic moment for the company. And that is a very exciting problem. It's never, I'm never gonna get like a little badge saying that, hey, I worked on, well, maybe I will, I don't know. I probably won't. I won't have like you are a Googler type of, or you used to work at Facebook, or one of these sort of prestigious, weird brands, things that we have in IT, which is probably what most people would consider working on, like an exciting app. Or you worked on Tinder, or you worked on Spotify or something like that, one of their systems, and so forth and so forth. Because the reality is, guys, that there are a lot of systems in the world, and sure, if you're interested in working on products that are very interesting, as I said, then you get in line. There's a lot of different developers who have that sort of focus, but at least for me, I don't really care if I'm working for like a really super interesting company that has like an amazing app, because trust me when I say this, guys, there are some apps that are very high profile that aren't all that interesting to work on from a problem solving perspective. One of the most interesting projects that I've ever worked on was for a tiny little startup. You probably never heard of it, but they were working on a system that was among the most complicated systems that I've ever seen. It was enormously interesting to work on, and this sort of system is sort of the same thing, because the challenges and the personal growth I'm going to have as part of this project, even though most of you will probably never see this system, is tenfold anything I could get from most of the cool companies that you know about. Because, as I like to tell people, it's never about the project if you want to test your problem solving skills, or it's never about the company. It is about the problem. You can be an idiot and still get a job at Google, and can remain an idiot because they never put you on something that is interesting. They have you, in a technical, logical sense, they have you cleaning up after the people who do the real work. And sure, you have Googler on your name, but you're still a shit software developer. So what I want you to take away from this is that the reason why most programmers work on boring apps is because the world's repository of boring apps is higher than the amount of interesting ones. And that has nothing to do with problem solving skills. It's not really a reflection on how good you are. It is more about what is your life situation like? Where do you live? How much risk are you willing to take on? What are the availability and competition levels for the more interesting projects? Are you interested in working on those, etc., etc.? There are a lot of reasons as to why someone might not work on an interesting application. But the problem-solving skills, trust me when I say this, guys, some of the most boring systems in the world, you've probably never heard about most of the really tough problems of the world. And the problem-solving skills that you want to test or use, they can be applied in many, many areas. And it's actually very rare that you know about a lot of the apps that people are working on. And just because you work on a famous app or something like that doesn't necessarily mean that your skills are higher than that of someone who's working on something that is a little bit less known. Brand value and fame and things like that is often something that we mistake. It's often something mistaken for value or challenge or quality or things like that. And let me just tell you this. It's really rare that you find that these sorts of famous brands or like this sort of promotion and so forth is all it's cracked up to be when you actually get down to the real details of what you're actually doing. And software developers seems to not realize that, but guys, you are susceptible to marketing just as much as all the people who are buying very expensive designer clothes that aren't really that good in the first place. Have a great day.